diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Y así pues es algo, un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad, y en nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente, y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa, que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver.
Calling the General Government Committee meeting to order on October 23rd, 2024. It's 9 o'clock. Clerk, could you conduct the roll call?
Chair Hashak,
Here.
Supervisor McCourty,
Here.
Right. And Marlena Dooley, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, very good. So agenda item 2A is discussion and possible action, including providing recommendations to staff and a referral to the Board of Supervisors recommending approval of the County of Mendocino Cannabis Department monthly update for September 2024. I'll look to staff. Sarah McBurney.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Sarah McBurney with the Mendocino Cannabis Department. For the month of September, the department had active under review applications of 75 CCBLs, with an additional 578 that have been issued by the department. That leaves a total of 653 commercial cannabis business licenses in program. Our September breakdown, we issued 14 renewals. We issued 15 Phase 1 and 2 initial issuances. We issued 1 Phase 3. We had 5 CCBL applications withdraw. We denied 7 CCBL applications. And then we processed an additional 2 modifications and 3 reassignments. The total number of CCBLs processed for the month of September is 42. We've had 304 CCBLs issued year to date for 2024, and 180 applications withdrawn or denied. So those are no longer in program. For our issued license set, we have had 26 issuances that have annual DCC licenses. An additional 459 licenses have been issued with provisional licenses. And then we have issued 93 applications that don't currently have a DCC license. So again, total issued 578. For renewals, issued year to date is 128, while renewals pending are 15. And then we provided a approximation of square footage. So as a reminder for everyone, when you look at the table of square footage, it's an approximation if every licensed CCBL holder or applicant grew the total number of square footage that they had applied for. So our approximate total issued square footage for the month of September was 6,197,500, and then the approximate total under review was 210,000. For CCBL applications, we currently have 19 initial applications issued assigned to contract planners. So that's our 4-leaf contract planners, with an additional 8 applications that are renewals assigned to 4-leaf. MCD expects that our 4-leaf contract will not be renewed, and we will end services with them on 12/31/24. The number of under review applications assigned to MCD planners is 52, and the number of under review renewals assigned to MCD planners is 7.
Can I stop you for a second?
Of course.
So with the 19 that are assigned to contract planners, that, is that all of it then? Is that gonna,
That's all
is
of
that
it.
the last batch,
Yeah.
right?
And I think that number is a little bit misleading as well. So it's 19 that are currently issued to them. We do currently have 2 assignments that, and it was more during the month of September, but we have 2 assignments that are assigned to 4-leaf, but have already been recommended for issuance by 4-leaf. So what that means is 4-leaf has conducted the review, they're ready to issue. We are waiting on perhaps a payment or a signature on a compliance plan or a signature on a CCBL affidavit. It is important to note that as we approach this deadline, we are going to be denying more applicants that are responsive. So last month, we did have to deny someone with a provisional license simply because they hadn't paid for their CCBL application since July. And so, you know, anytime we have to deny an applicant, we do try to reach out and make sure the due diligence is there. We reach out via phone, email, and also USPS certified mail to ensure that folks are getting the notification and really have ample opportunity to do whatever is delinquent for their application to become issued. But it is important for CCBL applicants to note that the department is going to have to make decisions on these applications, whether that's a denial or an issuance. And if it is an applicant-driven delay, we will be forced into denying applications.
Okay. Yes.
So, Sarah, when this is all said and done, will we have around 600 license holders, in your opinion?
If I may, through the chair. It's hard to say. I think that currently we have 653. We definitely, I think, have lost a lot of applications this year, but I do think the number of applications that we've lost, whether it's through a withdrawal or denial, is not a true indication of what we hope to see moving forward. So, you know, this is the first time that the department's really been able to grasp the workload and get a handle on it. So as we move through these applications, if the remainder of the applications that need to be issued all make it to issuance, all of these applicants have met compliance at the local level. They've been responsive to the department. They've paid the fees they've needed to pay. In theory, everyone is working with the DCC. Even the 93 applicants that we've issued that don't have DCC license, the expectation is that they're working with the DCC to get their annual license. And, you know, a lot of the folks that don't currently have their DCC annual license, they can't cultivate. So a lot of the folks in program that cannot cultivate because they don't have that DCC license, the hope is that they use tools at the local level, such as tax appeals or fallowing or communicating with the department, so that way, even at the local level, they can stay issued while they work towards that annual license, and they have a little bit of relief from perhaps the taxes or you know, different fees that we offer at the local level. But getting licensed at the annual level and then really just seeing fully regulated program at both local, state, and it's just a streamlined process where everyone just has their annual licenses that they go to. And for MCD, the goal is to get everyone to that 5-year tier as well.
How many do not have the state licenses right now? BCC?
Well, I'm sorry, what was the question?
How many are still waiting for their state licenses?
So if you look in the monthly report, we have 459 provisionals. So all of those folks are still waiting to transition to annual, and 26 have annual licenses. And then it's important too, the 93 applicants that don't have DCCs, they will still also need to apply for their annual as well. So I think that there's a lot of folks waiting for annual licensure at the DCC. If folks had a provisional license, they could absolutely cultivate. They're still considered in program. The provisional renewal deadline expires on December 31st, 2024. So it is important that those provisional license holders are really looking at that date and making sure that everything's in line. The county requirements are that we notify LSAs, but they need to make sure that they're working with CDFW to extend dates there. I know the DCC has really been cracking down on LSA dates, and if those are expired, you cannot have your annual license. So it's important for applicants to make sure they're doing all the due diligence. I really encourage anyone that has questions or is worried about their local license, please contact the department. We can let you know, make sure you're in good standing, make sure that, you know, you're prepped for that provisional license renewal deadline. And then, yeah, I mean, the goal is to basically get everyone there. And I'm not sure if that answered your question, sorry. Okay, good. Okay, great. And so with site inspections, I do want to note that for the month of September, the department only conducted 3 site inspections. And the reason why there's such a dramatic decrease in the past month is because our backlog workload is complete. So we have inspected everyone at this point. Any inspections moving forward performed by the department would either be special inspections or phase 3 inspections. So I would like to recognize code enforcement and the resource sharing that they've given to the department the last year and a half, basically. It's really allowed us to work through these backlog of applications. And kind of jumping ahead, but when we talk about MCD being on track, you may have noticed that the Gantt chart has slid a little bit. I think that it's important to note that all of the applications that are left, it's hard to really say that they aren't going to require the full review time anymore. So, you know, if we have the 52 phase 1 and 2 applications left on MCD side, 20 phase 3 and 7 renewals, those applications, every single one of them have had some sort of review done on them. So they aren't going to take, the initial applications are not going to take the full 25 hours of review. They're not going to take the site inspection. So when we look at the Gantt chart moving forward, every application has been touched. Every application has hours of review already contributed to it. Again, not to sound like a broken record, but I really encourage applicants to make sure they're responding to the department. At this point, we're really looking, as we approach the deadline on these applications that are left, is the delay applicant driven or is it process driven? Is there something holding them up in the process, such as an administrative permit through, setback requirements or something like that, that we need to help them work through with planning and building and ensure that they meet those deadlines? Is it something, a bio survey, something with CDFW that we can help them work through as well? Anyone that is process driven, we're definitely going to make sure that we kind of help pull them over the finish line. We want to pull the applicants that are applicant-driven delays over the finish line too, but we do need help with that. So applicants that are waiting, if you still have not been, you're one of the small handful of applicants that has not been issued at the county level, and you're like, man, the county hasn't reached out to me. That's not correct. We definitely have, so please contact us. Okay. So, we just kind of talked about being on track. I think really great news, and this is more for an October update, but I think it's still important to highlight. The EIR was finalized and certified on October 17th of this year, so we just got certified this month. This is a really big step for all Mendocino applicants. And kind of going back to what my previous thought was, that the EIR is going to allow those license holders that are provisional to lead to that annual license. So the biggest holdup, I think, to date has really been getting the EIR finalized. We're here. It's amazing. We have a challenge period now of 30 days. So the DCC is the lead agency. They were able to finalize and certify that. So they have 30 days of a challenge period. After that challenge period ends, we should start seeing applicants transition pretty rapidly. I know in conversation with the DCC, they had a bucket of applicants that they had already identified as ready to transition. So a lot of those applicants have, again, been the folks that have done everything right. There are 5-year renewal tiers at the county level. They've had their provisional licenses, they have their LSA dialed in, they perhaps have already done bio surveys and turned them in. And I think that anyone kind of sitting in that bucket watching this or looking back at this meeting should feel really confident they're in that tier. With the EIR certification, I still encourage applicants who have specific questions in regards to their licensing at the state level. It's still a state level led process, right? So I would encourage them to reach out to licensing@cannabis.ca.gov. That is the direct email for the DCC. And as I mentioned before, the department's happy to review their local license and ensure that everything is met and give them recommendations on what is going to make their transition to the annual level easier. And we definitely have had applicants utilize the department for that information, and we're happy to answer it. And our goal is to get, like I said, all 653 of those applicants drugged through that finish line and make sure that we're just a regulated processing. So.
Okay, Supervisor McGordy.
So in light of yesterday's meeting where we talked about being able to have 2 licenses up to 20,000 square feet, does the EIR cover that?
If I may, through the chair?
Yes.
Yes, so the EIR did take into account 22,000 of canopy per APN. So the EIR definitely covers the 20,000 of mature canopy, and the M&D at the local level, which is kind of like our CEQA, also covers that 20,000 square feet as well.
Mm-hmm. So while there's still seems to be some disagreement among the cannabis community what the total square footage should be for a grow, at least from the point of view of environmental documents, we're clear to do up to 22,000 square feet. Is that correct?
If I may. Yes, that's correct. And you know, kind of talked about in yesterday's conversation. We'll see where that conversation goes, right? I think the community is passionate about it, and you know, from the cannabis department standpoint, we're happy to do whatever the board directs, and we will see where 2025 brings us.
So an applicant who wants to double their area, what does the process look like from your perspective?
Yeah. Okay. County
Are
Council.
we good?
Charlotte Scott. So we don't have agendized for today the impact of the meeting of the decision by the board yesterday on the rejection of the ordinance amendment. And so I would recommend not getting into discussions about the next steps for those existing applications and future applications.
Okay, I just think it's a very interesting development. One that will probably be visited upon this organization, this general government committee. I think I'm sure we'll be spending time with it.
Yeah. Like all things cannabis. So, so what we're seeing is the EIR is done, which is a great accomplishment for the county and the state. Thanking the state very much for their help on that. So the people, the 479 or whatever, 89 that are in the queue there that have their provisionals will be able to use the EIR to go forward with their annuals as soon as this appeal period is over. Great.
Yeah, that is my understanding. So my hope is, and from what I'm hearing from the DCC, like I said, after that period is over, we should start seeing kind of, I'm hoping it's like Oprah, right? You get a license, I just hope we get that news back. So I think based on conversations with the DCC, it sounds like they're ready to do that. We've been really collaborating as multi-agencies. So CDFW, DCC, and the county has all been collaborating around this process. There's been really great conversations about each level's review and kind of where applicants stand, which has been allowed the DCC to identify this bucket of applications that will be easy to transition. There are definitely still applicants, even with provisionals, that have a lot of work to do for their annual license as well. So I think it's important to note that and really encourage applicants. If you're concerned, you can, like I said, you can reach out to the cannabis department to check your local status. We can give you recommendations just on what the DCC is going to be looking for. But if you're concerned, definitely utilize that cannabis that licensing at cannabis.ca.gov to contact the DCC directly. Now that the EIR is finalized, the DCC should have some more direct lines of communication with folks reaching out via that email. I think before the EIR was certified, there was not a lot that really there wasn't really a way or to say like, okay, here's your license, this is where it is, this is what's happening with the EIR. Right now we know the EIR is finalized, it's certified. and we can really have those conversations, and the DCC can have those conversations with applicant too. I think they're going to be pretty busy for the next couple of weeks transitioning all these, but I definitely encourage applicants to reach out sooner rather than later.
So really, the county, there's a few, 50 or fewer that are still being processed.
Yeah, that's correct. As of September, it was a total of 75 left to process.
Okay, so we're still dealing with those. We got to get those done by the end of the year, hopefully, right? But for all the others, now that the EIR is done, it's an issue between the cultivators and the DCC. And the county we've done our part, right?
That's correct. Local authorization is a big part of annual licensure at the state level. And so, I think it's one checkbox complete for applicants when they're looking at their overall path to annual licensure. They should feel good, and they should be really proud of themselves for getting that local authorization, that local license, and be able to move forward on that. And to your point, there still are those 75 applicants that do need to be processed in there. And then there's also the whole other bucket that is not provisionally licensed, right? So the folks that now are not in these provisional licenses bucket that will still need to transition, and that path will be spun off the EIR, I believe, to get to their annual license as well. But I think everyone in Mendocino County who's in the regulated market should feel really good about the certification of the EIR, because it's one step closer. It's a huge checklist. That's also another one that's been checked off for every applicant in program, regardless of where they are at the local level.
Yeah. Job well done.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to an overall grant update for the department. So our local equity entrepreneurial program grant is well underway. So we did do fee relief applications, which were open we opened an application window from May 13th, 2024 to June 13th, 2024. During that window, the department processed a total of $514,000 in fee relief applications. So fee relief applications went to tax relief. They could have gone to MCD for renewal fees or licensing fees. The fees could be used for planning and building, environmental health. We had one AQMD fee as well. So I think, great opportunity there for locally certified folks. We have also begun to work with our procured vendor, MGT Consulting, to provide a update to the county equity assessment. So our current equity assessment that's live, and one of the findings did recommend an update to the equity assessment that is currently here every couple of years. So we're in that renewal window for an updated equity assessment. And so MGT is kind of in the stages of gathering documents and working with the department. Soon they will be working to perform community outreach and reaching out to locally authorized individuals to ensure that they're just getting feedback on the equity program in Mendocino County and how that's going. Cannabis Services is our procured vendor for direct technical assistance, and they are live and operational as well. Overall, the cannabis department has received really great feedback from the community about CBS and the direct technical assistance that they've been delivering. In the report, I have a couple of numbers that I talked about. So they have a 33% view rate for their Vimeo platform and a 54% open rate on all email notifications. That number has since increased since the publishing of this report. So the open rate is now jumped to 65%, and which is a 43% increase from the month of August. And during the month of September, Cannabis Services performed a metric webinar, which is the local track and trace and state track and trace program, and it is really key for applicants to be compliant in metric when we're talking about annual licensure and just overall compliance in the regulated market moving forward. So very happy 9 people attended the live webinar for that, and I think Cannabis Services feedback was a lot of really great questions were asked as well during that session. So if you're a locally verified individual through the cannabis program, really encourage you to continue and utilize Cannabis Services for any ongoing startup business costs related to your business that you're operating. They can help with that as well. They can even help you perform specific standard operating procedures for your business and different key things. So really excited about that. We did get notification from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development that round 6 is open. It opened this month in October, and so the department had believed we would not be able to apply for round 6 due to a required county match. And that has since been discovered that we actually are going to be able to apply for at least $500,000 in additional funding through LEAP Round 6. So we're currently working on that application now in hopes to get that turned in and perhaps provide more opportunity. As I've talked about, there's 276 verified individuals awaiting initial direct grant distribution. And so the current round of funding, we're going to be able to process about 18 direct grants. The department believes we'll process those in January of 2025. And then our round 5 will be extinguished. Round 6, although a much smaller amount, will still allow more of those applicants to kind of receive that relief. And, you know, we're open to any future opportunities through that program as well. As long as we can apply for it, we will.
And there's no match required?
That is correct for the $500,000. So we'll definitely take it.
Right on.
Yeah. And then for our local jurisdiction assistance grant program, we have been under a routine audit with that program, and we received notification on August 29th that the California State Auditor closed the previous 2023-048, is the title of it, direct grant audit, and that final report was released to the public. In that report, Mendocino County did not have any recommendations. And then as soon as that one ended, we did receive notice that, I guess a little bit before, it wasn't right when it ended, but we did receive that we're on to our next routine audit. So this program will be audited each year, and so we're currently undergoing that second year audit now. We have submitted a third amendment, and it was approved to the Department of Cannabis Control. And we were able to, so we've done 3 different amendments to our budget with the LJAGP, but overall. And with the last, with Amendment 2, we were able to increase total direct grant funding. A3 was used to kind of square up our last fiscal year spending, so everything was dollar to dollar for the fiscal year, and then it allowed us to have really a realistic picture of the funding that's available left for fiscal year 24-25. We are and have submitted, during the month of October, we submitted a 4th amendment to the DCC. So it appears currently that there's $700,000 or so of EIR funds that were previously allocated to Ascent. That Ascent has notified us that they will not be in need of, and so we're working with the DCC to reallocate that funding to a couple different buckets. The department's hope is we can, 1, increase direct grant funding again, and 2, because the department has received notification all LJAGP funds need to be expended by March 31st, 2025, we're hoping to bring on our already procured vendor, Cannabis Business Services, to assist with direct grant administration as well. So currently where we stand in our direct grant queue, we feel great about the ability to process what we have, but our hope is with increasing direct grant funding and bringing Cannabis Business Services on, we can really encourage folks that haven't applied for LJAGP and really, you know, be available to answer more questions and do individual outreach to those provisional license holders to have them apply, and then get all of those applications in a hope that all of that funding is pushed out the door. The fear is currently right now there are still remaining funds available for provisional license holders to apply for. And we have been reaching out to identified provisional license holders that haven't applied yet, trying to get them to apply. But right now it's just via email. But there's still a large amount of funds that have not been utilized. So we want to expend those funds. We want to get them out to the community. We'd like to have them in the hands of Mendocino County residents versus having to send them back. So we're really working on all angles to try to maximize those dollars before the very quick deadline of March 31st.
So out of the $4.5 million that we've given out through this grant process, that with the audit, there were no findings. That's really incredible.
I agree. I think that the audit we're working on now, I feel really great about too. You know, I think that the department's just working really hard to ensure that the program's on track, and we are able to hopefully assist applicants and keep them in the regulated market. So we'll see how the second audit goes, and then the third audit, and you know, kind of looping back around to LEAP round 6 as well. But overall grant programs, we still we have, for LJAG specifically, we've received 263 applications. Out of those, 245 were viable. We still, right now, as of today, before A4 goes through, we have $542,000 still available to apply for. So that means we can still take 21, almost 22 applications if full, if paid in full at the $25,000. We have processed a total of 133 applications, so we still have 50 some odd applications in queue. We are working through those each day. Our admin side of the cannabis department is a lot smaller, and huge recognition to our admin assistant, Heidi Krumel, who's really been a huge helping hand in getting these applications over the finish line. So each day we sign more, I shouldn't say each day, each week we sign more AP batches to get checks out to individual community members. So we're hopeful to get all of that out.
Okay. Very good.
And with that, I believe that concludes my report.
All right. Supervisor McGordy.
Just a recognition to all the hard work that went into here, and I want to recognize Steve in particular, because this is a task that was given to him, was to straighten out what was a tangled yarn of not very well functioning applications and processes. We looked at where we were, 24 months ago, and where we are today. It's been quite a journey, and now there's, thanks to Sarah and her staff too, there's just quite a lot of order here, and I consider this one of the successful turnarounds of, like, our financial department, that is really making Mendocino County government have a little bit more credibility compared to where we were. So thank you for everything that you and your staff do, and thanks to Steve. I finally learned what a Gantt chart was. Thanks to Steve.
Very good. Any public comment?
Hi, my name's Liana Costa. Thank you for the report, but I'd like to respectfully disagree with some of the information. So I was looking at the number of 578 total active commercial cannabis licenses issued by Mendocino County, and only 4% of those can be renewed in the state that they're at, because after January 1st of 2025, you can't renew a provisional license. So just to put it in perspective, 26 of 478 is 4%. So for the cannabis community, the golden ticket is to have an annual license, and in this county, only 4% of the operators do. But then also, the category that my tenant falls into is the 16% of the 93 that have Mendocino permits, but they don't have DCC permits, so they can't operate. So 79% is how many provisional licenses are operating right now. Well, in theory, are probably issued, because not all those businesses are likely operating. But they need to transition to an annual license. And if they haven't followed the proper renewal steps, they're not going to be, they can't renew their provisional license after January 1st of 2025. And so yesterday, I was here at your meeting, and you guys were talking about the 26, and someone said, oh, we've done a great job with our annual licenses. Well, 4% just doesn't feel like a great job. My sister's an English teacher, and she teaches AP English, and she tells me about AP English classes. If you get past the AP exam with a certain percentage rate, then you don't have to take that class in college, and so that's the big savings for parents. And so the AP tests are based on a score of 1 to 5. If you want your AP class to hit at most colleges, you need to hit a 5, which is 100%. Some people get 4s, which are 80%, and those are only accepted at a couple more colleges, and very few colleges accept 3%, 3, which is 60%. So just looking at the 4% of people that have annual licenses, I just don't feel like that's a great job. And there's a lot of people in the cannabis community that are struggling, and 79% of them need to make it to annual licenses, and another 16% need to get their DCC license so they can operate into the future. And I just wanted to say that.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. So, Sarah?
Yeah, if I may through the chair. So again, Sarah McBurney, Mendocino Cannabis Department. I would like to provide some clarity. So the 26 licenses that currently have annual licenses, those were a part of an early batch that the DCC was able to transition through our administrative permit process. So unlike the ministerial process that the Mendocino Cannabis Department utilizes for our local DCC or for our local MCD license, the DCC utilized our administrative permit, which is a discretionary process, had its own SEQR review to look at each site specifically and transition those to annual. After those were transitioned to annual license, they started the task of the EIR. So the holdup has been the finalization of the EIR, and as currently stated, that was finalized on the 17th. So again, a huge checkbox for all application, or checkmark win for all applicants, even phase 3 applicants, because the EIR is going to provide that clarity for transition of provisional to annual and overall annual license. And again, once the challenge period is open, we will see a pretty large increase in terms of that transition. The biggest step and the biggest logjam we were seeing was the environmental review being finalized. And now that that's done at the state level, they can really continue that review. And I do also just want to point out too that, again, local authorization has been given for 578 applicants, which is part of that annual license. That transition or annual license is a state process.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the process is kind of clear about what people need to do at this point to get to their annual licensure.
My name is Joseph Learman. I applied for the provisional license, I think over 2 years ago. Been going through the process. I brought a property up in Ukiah, right off of Ford Road. I was expecting to invest a lot of money into it, and the process has been going on for quite a while. I tried to expedite it with an expediter, it didn't help. It's just, I've been paid all the fees, everything I had to pay, the applications. It's gone to the DCC, and they are delaying it for some reason. Again, I'm not exactly understanding the process. That's why I had an expediter doing it for me. But it's been a big burden on me, and I just wonder if this committee can help in putting some pressure maybe on the process to get this my application processed.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
If I may, through the chair. So for the last speaker, if there is questions in regards to the local license, happy to reach out to Mendocino Cannabis Department. We have our phone available, email, and even open office hours Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, where applicants can drop in without an appointment. And then doing that too, I really encourage any applicant, including the last speaker, to come into the cannabis department just to kind of make sure all the ducks are in a row. Even if you're issued and you're like, hey, you know, the EIR just dropped, which I know is the last piece. I'm waiting for my annual. It's been a long road to get here, which we're completely sympathetic to. What steps do I need to take in your, you know, what do you think? And we can talk about, you know, the LSA finalization. We can talk about any potential botanical surveys that should be taken into consideration. You know, the EIR is working with the contracted vendor Ascent to perform site-specific review. So each site will get their own review, their own environmental review by that contractor. And they'll have their own set of criteria based on that review to get that applicant to annual license at the state level. But the county can kind of help in looking at your site and saying, hey, this is what we took into consideration for your county review. This is what they may ask for. Definitely make sure you're working with CDFW on that lake and stream bed alteration agreement. That's a huge one. We have seen the DCC revoking license for failure to do that. And CDFW, when working on the LSAs, is there's not a timeline adhered to that. So the biggest thing is if you've notified LSA, you have that, don't let it expire, because that's really going to set you back. But again, any applicants with questions about their annual license timing, please reach out to the DCC specifically at licensing@cannabis.ca.gov.
Okay. Any further comments from the public?
Good morning. My name's Corinne Powell. I'm a cultivator. And I want to echo some of the things that Sarah said, i.e. the technical assistant group has given me great assistance regarding metric and satisfying some violations that I was unaware of until I was inspected by the state. And without them, I'm sure I would not have had the capacity to get into the metric code and law as much as they did. So I commend them, and I was a huge skeptic in the beginning that they would be able to really assist us here when they are not California based. So that's a good thing. I also want to echo the supervisor's commendations for the department. They have done their job in cleaning up the mess they inherited. And I am always grateful for the effort that they have put in. But it is time that hopefully before the end of the year and change of you two supervisors, that this body is involved more in directing how things go in the cannabis legalization continuation. Because even though county council has advised don't talk about yesterday's events, that particular action at the board has left hundreds of people who are operators, small businesses, unable to expand for a variety of reasons, some of which is zoning code, disenfranchised, completely disenfranchised. And I'm not sure if that will be manifest in unbelievable fatigue in the processes that are required to be licensed both at the local and the state level, or whether just economic factors will cause the retreat from literally hundreds of operators. So I have always offered an opportunity for another license path. Yesterday I offered the suggestion of a working group to try to reconcile some of the issues that are now truly separating the community. And I beseech this committee to become involved and perhaps even proactive in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I think, Corinne, we have on the agenda for the November 13th meeting to deal with micro businesses. And just, I want McBurney to pass on those kudos to CBS and to your staff, because that's important to hear. And I'm sure we'll be involved in this going forward. So, okay. Any further comments online or? Okay, Ms. Nelson.
Good morning. I'm sorry I couldn't travel there to be there in person, but I appreciate everything that's been presented in the discussion so far. and of course, this committee's active engagement and participation. I I also concur with all of the kudos of Steve, of Sarah, of the entire staff, of the PBS and code enforcement staff that has lent additional resources. But I would modify what Corinne just said in terms of they've done their job in terms of cleaning up the mess they inherited. They've done it with a level of service and respect that has been absent in every, or not every iteration, but most of the iterations in the past, and with a smile and with professionalism. So that's another added layer to the excellent work that they've done, besides the efficiency in which they're processing their portion of the puzzle. And where I think we could use some assistance at this point is, since there's been such clear collaboration with the state and other agencies on the state annual license conundrum and the end of the provisional licensing program. And we're all so excited that the EIR was certified, but there are many issues, technical, pragmatic implementation issues that are completely lacking transparency and causing probably a lot of the continued anxiety that you've been hearing for cultivators who have provisional licenses and are wondering what the next steps. So, for example, it may be that Ascent is producing a site-specific review, a CEQA document in review saying what needs to happen, but it was specifically anticipated that perhaps providing the biological reports that may or may not be needed for any particular site would be a part of those LJAGP funds that were dedicated for this entire process. I'm glad to hear that the $700,000 is coming back in through the LJGAP program, and I've got lots of kudos to say about the department with respect to their grants. But I have absolute concerns about the logistics. And one of the difficulties is, while this body is in charge and this department is in charge of the local situation, and they have done their job, it also is in a position of special knowledge with respect to the mechanics of how the state level stuff does. So I guess my request would be to have this committee and the department do what it can to request a community meeting for provisional license holders with the DCC. Just ask the DCC if such a meeting could happen. I have found that sometimes the DCC's published notices lack specifics. Certainly, giving an email address for licensing does not result in the specific answers, and I totally respect that. In part, that may have been because the AIR wasn't final, but also just in general, the messaging is not usually very specific, and sometimes it's inaccurate. So I think anything that our county can do to appreciate the efforts of the collaboration and encourage that further step for additional clarification, I think would do a lot to making people, who are maybe on the fence of trying to decide whether to give up or not, or hang in there, have some additional encouragement. So I do have just a couple of other quick things.
Yeah, could you be quick?
Yes.
And thank you.
Will.
Ms. Nelson, we will, I'll talk to staff about that and we'll see what we can do.
I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. With respect to the third amended LJAGP, it would be great. I'm not sure, and forgive me that I don't realize whether it's true or not, if the application materials could be put on the website or otherwise published so that we could see specifically what was asked for. and whether or not there is time to ask for some changes in the amount that goes to direct grants versus additional fee waivers or anything like that, although hopefully it will be too late for fee waivers because people will have transitioned to annuals. The other question is regarding the equity assessment and if there's any additional information about the time frame that the MGT Consulting will be reaching out and what that process looks like to get community engagement in the update of the equity assessment. That would be excellent. And let's see, there was one other thing is if we could potentially, when you're calendaring other things for next year's GGC and cannabis issues, whether it's through workshops or whatever, the tax issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nelson. So about the timeline for the equity grant and MTG work there.
Yeah, if basically with MGT, the process is really in the early stages. So they just started in September, and a lot of that was just overall evaluation of the county and process and SOP collection through the department, and interviewing certain administrative staff on our side. The next step with MGT is going to be really talking about community engagement and what that timeline looks like. So I definitely will communicate that out. Please keep an eye out on Canna Notes for any specifics, and we'll give everyone a heads up, so it's not just, hey, MGT wants to talk to you specifically tomorrow. It's, hey, MGT will be reaching out. They are a procured vendor. The county recognizes them. It's not some random person trying to grab your information. This is someone who's really working with the county to update our equity assessment. And there's two streams to that. They want to reach out to individual equity operators and then also just overall community advocates as well. So there's two pieces of outreach involved in there as well. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any further comments online?
Seeing none.
All right. Seeing no further public comment, Supervisor McGordy, anything else? All right. Well, thank you to all the staff in the Cannabis Department for really doing an exceptional job. See you in a few weeks. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we're going to move right into the item 2B, which is discussion and possible action, including a recommendation to the board to either authorize or prohibit a micro-enterprise home kitchen operation program for the incorporated and unincorporated areas of Mendocino County. And then after this, we will take a break. So there'll be a 10-minute break. And
excuse me, Chair. Excuse me. I just wanted to make sure that the committee makes a motion and votes on referring the report to the Board of Supervisors.
Well, I guess we're supposed to have a motion for item 2A.
Okay, I make a motion that we accept the report from our cannabis division.
And this would send it to the board?
Send it to the board.
Okay, I'll second that.
Supervisor McGordy?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashak?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Very good. All right. So we'll look to Ms. Dooley.
Good morning.
Yeah, just thank you for bringing this forward because I know it's been out there for a few years and there's been some changes in Sacramento on it, and I think, and so anyway, thanks for your work on it.
Good morning. Thank you. Marlena Dooley, Director of Environmental Health. Yes, as you say, there's been some stops and starts since the initial legislation was passed for the state. I do want to start off by pointing out that although there is a similarity in the title, this potential program has nothing to do with cannabis microenterprises. This is solely proposing microenterprise home kitchens for home chefs. And let me start back. In 2019, this became an option at the state level, but it was predicated on the jurisdiction having authority, which in this case for Mendocino County is the County of Mendocino and the Environmental Health Department, opting into a program. There was the allowance to opt out, and since being adopted and incorporated in the California Retail Food Code, approximately 25 to 30 jurisdictions have chosen to opt in and create programs. Some jurisdictions have chosen to opt out and prohibit programs, and some jurisdictions have abstained from making that choice as of yet. I will say that part of the delay in some implementations has been that COVID hit, and this program was proposed during a time where resources were directed in other directions. And now that we are back to more of a business as usual, we've been focusing on implementing what we would like to propose implementing a program that is going to represent an expansion. It would represent a new kind of food operation in our county. I will say that in 2023, the Workforce Investment Board put in monies to support grants to environmental health departments to investigate what a program in their jurisdiction may look like. And those funds were very helpful, and Mendocino County applied for and received $46,000 towards that endeavor, and we spent some time examining the code and considering what that would look like for our county. And we've decided that we'd like to propose a opt-in option, and we really want to bring forward our proposal for discussion, consideration, and have a conversation about what we think would work for our county. Also hear from yourselves and the public on what they might like to see, and hopefully address items ahead of time of the potential of taking it to the full board. So that's the main gist for coming to GGC today. And I appreciate Supervisor Hashcheck. He's met with me on this throughout the last 18 months to see about what a opt-in option could be for the county. And that is what I have brought forward. I will say that the legislation allowed for counties to opt in or opt out by ordinance or resolution. We spent a lot of time discussing which route we would like to go, and at this point the division is going to propose opting in by resolution, and we would like to propose opting in by resolution and implementation of the chapters in the Retail Food Code as they are, and we can talk about that if that's an aspect you guys would like to speak to. I think the example I provided in our attachments is an example of San Mateo County's opting in by ordinance. It is a minor distinction, but I do want to put it out there that my intention is to bring forward and see if there is support for recommendation of opting in by resolution, but that's an option there. And we would certainly like to hear comments from yourselves, but I will say that we've spent a lot of time meeting with planning and building, and had some consultations with county council, as these businesses would be operating out of a private home. It really is a type of small business that allows people to start directly out of their homes on a small scale if they are wishing to enter the food economy. And it brought up a lot of questions for planning and building about building standards and zoning code requirements. And the legislation itself, a lot of thought and a lot of consideration was given to the zoning code, and there is a chapter in the California Retail Food Code that speaks to the building standards. It speaks to change of occupancy. It speaks to the zoning code, and it's our interpretation through working with County Council that the section of the California Retail Food Code that states that these home kitchens will be exempt from predominantly all of planning and building's zoning and building requirements stands, and in this case that means they would not need to upgrade bathrooms for ADA compliance or apply for a change of occupancy or go through any of the planning discretionary processes to become a home kitchen. So I want to point that out, that this is going to be an environmental health permit that does not go through any kind of discretionary review by planning and building, and does not come with employee accessibility requirements at this time, although that is a concern of our building department. If there were to be employees, how would that mesh with the requirements in the building code? So we spent a lot of time this year thinking about that and in conversation with planning and building to make sure that we all are understanding what would be allowed. And at this time, Environmental Health's interpretation of the Retail Food Code section implies that the operator and the resident who lives there is the sole employee of the business. There are potentials for delivery that we can discuss, but for all intents and purposes, this type of business is supposed to really allow a home chef to have a business in their private home and see if they can grow it to a larger capacity. There's a limit on how many meals can be provided, which is 30 meals in a single event or 60 individual meals in a week. So it is intended to not be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's intended to be on a smaller scale than that. And there is a cap on the income that could be earned from this type of business at $50,000 currently. This is very similar to the caps that were initially implemented for the cottage food permit type. And since cottage food has been in place longer, we have seen that salary cap raised. So it is certainly something that is potentially likely to be raised in the future. But right now, 30 meals in a single event, up to 60 meals in 1 week, and $50,000 are the main caps for this type of operation at this point. And the division really looked to our experience with the cottage food permit and the cottage food industry for guidance on what this might look like in our county. There's specific language in the Retail Food Code about arranging for annual inspections, and it appears to us that they would be very similar to a cottage food A type license in what we would need to be doing. So in a lot of our recommendations, we have mirrored the minimum requirements that were already in place for cottage food businesses, which are food operations that are also operating out of private residences. So we've really tried to keep parity there. And I think I'll take a moment to hear any comment or any questions.
Well, again, thank you for working on this. I think it's something that people in Mendocino County really want. And there's a lot of people probably already doing something like this in their homes. And so it'd be nice to have some kind of regulation and official capacity in it. Just, I guess I'm looking at the cottage food license, and then this seems to have more flexibility, offer more opportunities for people. So why would a person, and if the fees are, you're saying that the fees would probably be similar.
That is what we're proposing. We don't believe that we don't know how many people are interested in doing this, and we are certainly there would not be a cap, there wouldn't be a limit, but we went into this thinking, well, when we launched cottage food, we weren't sure, and right now we've got about 20 Class A's participating. There are many more Class B's, but we have made the educated guess that it is going to be a similar response that the cottage food was. And to speak to your other question, the cottage food allows for some wholesale and retail sales, whereas Microenterprise Home Kitchen does not. So it could be that someone who is currently holding a cottage food license might like to expand into having and hosting events in their home to customers and delivering or having customers come pick up meals from their homes in addition to their wholesale retail. The microenterprise legislation does not allow for a home chef to have a retail sale or a wholesale sale. It is really intended to be alive, like you're cooking right there with your customers, and in the same day you've provided the meals, and it is a different niche in food service, so they're very distinct permit allowances.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Supervisor McGordy.
So if I understand this right, this is primarily for people who want to serve individuals a meal.
That same day, right directly out of their kitchen, either to consume on site or to take to go.
Right. So people who want to process food to sell, like a farmer's market or something, would not go this path.
No, you would still need other permits for those items. And this allows for the food item to be a potentially hazardous food item that has to be held under temperature for safety, whether that's hot or cold. Most of the other, like cottage B, it's usually shelf-stable items that are safer, that don't require time and temperature for public health safety. So this is a unique aspect of the microenterprise in that it can be any kind of food item, as long as they have the equipment that is rated to hold it and serve it within the amount of time that they're proposing in their SOPs to serve in.
Okay, so can they refrigerate it to deliver it, or what's the?
They might be required to, cold holding boxes. It's similar to satellite food delivery, food kitchens. A lot of entities already do this. You have to have hot holding, cold holding. Even some of our potentially food hazardous vendors at our farmers markets are hot holding and cold holding. They've got their coolers, they've got their hot holders. They're temping things when they arrive. They're recording them. We're checking them. So yes, all of that would still apply. They don't have to have commercial grade equipment. That's one of the allowances within the state code, is that all of the equipment is allowed to be their residential equipment.
And I'm thinking specifically of our tamale makers in the community. Would they be able to use this as a way to?
They would.
Okay. That's great.
But they would need to be located out of their residence, not the parking lots of most of our grocery stores.
Right.
Okay. Any public comment? Okay, seeing none. Any further comments?
I would say that I did reach out to the local cities, and I have only received positive feedback at this point, particularly from the area of the city of Point Arena. They are certainly, they think that this program would be a good fit for them. So I want to bring up the fact that if the county chose to opt in, it would be an opt-in for all of the county, including the incorporated cities. Environmental Health does the food inspections in all the incorporated cities. And the provision that was adopted into the Cal Code clearly states that if we opt in, it is for the entire county. There are no additional city opt-ins required.
Good.
I just have one more question too. So I'm thinking a lot about how we've tried to move a little bit more into sort of non-traditional farm stays and things like that, or we're talking about hip camp, and if someone wants to be a host to expand services for someone, is this a pathway that they could use? Like, you stay and you can get breakfast?
I think that the aspects that go through planning and building for that type of allowance would probably lead to them being permitted as a bed and breakfast, not a home chef hosting meals. I have not gone through that exercise with planning and building, but if off the top of my head, I would say probably not on that large of a commercial scale. You've got the limit of 30 meals a day, you've got the 60 a week, you've got the 50,000. So I don't see how all different aspects would really line up quite right in that scenario.
So, you know, for a lot of people who want to do hip camps will probably have, you know, under 5 sites. They might have 2 or 3, and they might want to be able to offer breakfast or, you know, dinner even, an option, kind of like you would in Europe. A lot of times you have an agriturismo that they only have 1 or 2 bedrooms, but you're encouraged to participate in farm activities, or they'll feed you at dinner. So I'm just wondering if that's something that would mesh with this, or would it be a whole different process?
Well, the food code has really clear distinctions on what a bed and breakfast is. So if it was the breakfast, I would think that the division would probably interpret that proposal to be more appropriate within the bed and breakfast. And we could talk about the pros and cons there. It's still a minimal inspection ratio, not 3 times a year, once a year. And I think the big difference there would be potential for having a commercial dishwasher in your kitchen. We have not implemented Microenterprise home kitchens, so I don't want to get too far ahead of myself in imagining how far they could go, although people are creative, and we would certainly consider it if it's within the allowances of the retail food code.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more question. Is that if this is approved by the board, then what's the plan for outreach?
Oh, that's a great question. We do an annual, I'm glad you asked, thank you. We do an annual newsletter that we send out to all of our permittees. We would certainly have this information there. We would certainly have a press release, and we could consider having a stakeholder meeting or a public outreach public meetings. A couple of the considerations that I'd certainly like to share are that we don't want to implement this program before there is a fee in place on our fee schedule. So when I consider implementation, I automatically have that in my mind. But as you know, we have our fee hearings twice a year, and they take 60 days to become effective after the fee hearing. So I know that we're having a fee hearing in December. My recommendation has been to propose the same fee structure as the Cottage Food A fee structure. And if the board supports that and approves that, then I would include that in our next fee hearing packet. So I would not want to roll out and offer this program until there's a fee in place. We would also need to have some time to really flesh out and finish our packet for applicants to use and our guidance documents. So I don't see the division being able to implement this any sooner than July of 2025. And that's barring any rewrites or reconsiderations or other differing recommendations of the board or opposal at the board. Presuming everything went as quickly as it possibly could, I really don't see that being possible until July. And with some delays that, you know, are possible at the board scheduling, it could be later than July. So we have some time to do outreach is my point. And it is something that, you know, we could potentially pursue some outreach before taking this to the board. Right now, I've proposed to take this to the board and roll it out and help people who are interested in doing this and see how it goes, and allow for those paths forward sooner than delaying for community meetings. But we could do that.
Okay.
There's just been such a delay. I know Supervisor Mulherin had started in 2019, and that got co-opted by other items and other things, and we've been working on this since 2023. So I'm trying to get it across the finish line. But that being said, there is no deadline, there is no rush. We could spend more time and have some community meetings if that's the recommendation of the board, or certainly yourselves.
So one kind of final comment is that this really offers, again, some entrepreneurial opportunities for people to start businesses with minimal amounts of money and kind of scale up from how it goes. And I remember one of my friends who traveled a lot in New Mexico talking about how his favorite Mexican restaurant was basically the back of somebody's house. And it really wasn't a restaurant, but they would cook for you if you went there and you showed up. And I could see things like that happening here in Mendocino County. People who want to work some, but not all the time, because the restaurant business is pretty grueling. But if you could organize some events that people came to, it could be really a lot of fun. It could offer to the variety of experiences that you have as a tourist in Mendocino County or as a resident, and I'm very supportive, and I'll make a motion to move this forward to the Board of Supervisors for consideration.
Okay, I'll second. And we've had public comment, so we will, that's the motion that you needed. So we'll call the question.
Chair Hashak?
Yes.
Member McGorty?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay, we're going to take a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at 10:25.
Yo creo que si conozco a alguien que está próxima a ser mamá, lo primero que haría sería recomendarle el programa, porque te entrega mucho apoyo, mucha información y más que nada como apoyo emocional, una guía, te da una visión diferente de cómo es ser papá aquí, quizás en este país.
Y así pues es algo, un bonito programa, porque pues es buena persona la señora y los ha atendido muy bien.
Pensé que nada más iba a ser un programa de orientación quizás para los nuevos padres, pero creo que nos llevamos una linda sorpresa porque Gaby es una persona muy cercana a nosotros, es como parte de nuestra familia, siempre ha estado dispuesta a ayudarnos y a escucharnos con nuestras dudas sobre la paternidad, y en nuestro caso, que estamos solos en este país, ha sido como de mucha ayuda.
Es un gran apoyo para nuevos padres, y más aún si están en nuestra situación, que somos extranjeros, que nuestra familia y amigos, como dice Carla, están en otro país, lejos. Entonces sí, viene muy bien el programa para apoyarse tanto emocional y como anímicamente y bueno, en varios aspectos del programa que nos ayuda a seguir adelante con esta nueva aventura.
Te ayuda como a ver los distintos recursos que tiene la comunidad para nuevos papás, entonces creo que es de gran ayuda.
No queda mucho que agregar, pero lo veo de la misma forma.
Que hemos aprendido algunas cosas aquí y pues los han ayudado, como este programa los ha ayudado para seguir creciendo a la bebé, como con buenos consejos y así.
Sí, y creo que también ha sido muy importante el tema de apoyarnos con el libro y saber qué actividades hacer con Máximo de acuerdo a su edad, cómo estimularlo, cómo cuidarlo de los peligros de la casa, como cosas que uno como papá nuevo no conoce, claro.
Pues a mí me gustaría que lo siguiéramos visitando aquí en la biblioteca de Covelo. Está tranquilo y muy bonito aquí.
Cuando no nos podemos reunir, nos comunicamos por Zoom o una llamada telefónica o por texto.
Donde nos visite, porque ha sido nuestra casa, a veces nosotros vamos a Willits y puede ser en el parque. Gaby llega, hacemos un resumen de cómo ha ido nuestra semana o qué hemos hecho de nuevo, cómo va el trabajo. Luego hacemos las actividades del libro, vemos si podemos hacer un juguetito nuevo para Máximo, a veces ella lo evalúa, cómo está su sentido motriz, qué ha aprendido de nuevo, nuevas palabras, y jugamos un ratito y conversamos.
A mí personalmente también me ayudó mucho a obtener mi licencia a conducir, que era un objetivo que teníamos en cuanto a la familia, sí, para poder estar tranquilos, así que encuentro que ha sido fundamental el apoyo.
El objetivo del programa es que las familias estén bien, y que las familias estén bien significa niños felices, niños sanos, y eso en un futuro es adultos sanos y un mundo mejor. Entonces está bueno.
She has made me feel like I'm important and I can go at my own pace, and that's all you need sometimes when you're feeling like you got nobody.
It was helpful to have somebody there kind of holding my hand and guiding me and letting me know this is kind of the normal. It felt like I was becoming a new mom, so it was very interesting and helpful, very, very helpful.
You know, there was that self-conscious part of me, like, will I be accepted even though I'm not perfect?
What I like the most is that she really listens.
The support that she gives me is special because she does it with love, and it's just natural, you know. That's all I could say. It just feels like somebody that I've known since I was little.
You know, I said to Jeanette, Jeanette, you're supposed to be with me for 5 years. Jeanette said, yeah, I know, I'm going to be with you guys for 5 years. That's when I said, well, I guess I can trust her. She's going to be with us for 5 years.
Yo creo que quizás pasó como a la segunda visita o algo así, como que ya nos presentamos formalmente. Y luego ya creo que en la segunda visita estaba como todo más tranquilo, como muy... como que el ambiente era muy familiar, entonces yo me sentí muy cómoda.
I felt like she cared for Sparrow too, and Sparrow really enjoyed it.
Yeah, she knew when Gabby came we were going to be making something or learning something, and she'd instantly start digging through Gabby's bags to find out what activity we were going to do.
Not only did we get the assistance with this program, but we also made a really good friend. I'm happy to call Gabby our friend.
I think the relationship that we've built has been just, she's a part of the family.
Are you prepared? We're the Office of Emergency Services, and we're committed to providing the most up-to-date and accurate information so that you and your family can stay safe during an emergency. Visit MendoReady.org. It's our one-stop shop for emergency information. You can sign up for emergency alerts, find your pre-established evacuation zone on our current emergencies map, and find hazard and preparedness information.
Imagine you're faced with a disaster such as a wildfire, and you're ordered to evacuate. I'll bet you wish you had more time in that moment. Now's your chance to buy yourself that time. Sign up for Nixle and Mendo Alerts on our website, MendoReady.org. Do it today.
If you want your family to be as resilient as possible, it's important to take some time today and visit MendoReady.org, where you can look up your pre-established evacuation zones on our current emergencies map. You can also find important tools to help maintain your situational awareness, such as the Alert California wildfire cameras and the Caltrans road conditions cameras. We hope you'll take some time today to prepare so that your family can be Mendo ready. Thank you.
When I first realized that I was going to be a parent, I was super scared. After 2 or 3 weeks of meeting in the home visiting program, I was totally comfortable with the fact that I was going to have a baby. Yes, I was still scared, but at the same time, I felt like I had some sense of strength behind me.
If I didn't have those resources that Jeanette provided me, I think it would be harder now.
Item
got into the
2C,
program.
which is discussion and possible action, including direction to staff regarding the development of Mendocino County's 2025 legislative platform. I'm going to look to staff and Ms. Hanson.
Good morning, Kelly Hansen, Executive Office. Good morning, Supervisor Hasjack, Supervisor Gordy, Deputy CEO Duncliffe, County Council Scott. Pursuant to County Policy Number 19, the Board of Supervisors adopts an annual legislative platform reflecting the county's priorities for legislative advocacy, state and federal funding, issues of interest to reflecting the county's priorities for legislative advocacy, state and federal funding, and issues of interest to local government since 2016. The development of the legislative platform has been referred to the Board of Supervisors General Government Standing Committee. The Executive Office requests direction and input from the Standing Committee on legislative priorities for the 2025 legislative platform. If I could share my screen, we can go through the suggested changes to the platform.
Yeah, and before we do that, I'd just like to say we're dealing with this early because of staff's recommendation to, and then we heard yesterday from Assemblymember Wood that it's better to get our recommendations into the legislature, our representatives, in December rather than January or February, which has been our tradition. So we've moved up the timeline to make sure that we can look at this a couple times and then get it to the board and get approval so that we can have it for, our representatives in December.
So we can start with the title page. We have a new section for agriculture, thanks to our new agricultural commissioner. And we have pulled out public health from the health and human services section. To note. And then starting with government transparency and public access. Are there any comments from either supervisor?
Which?
This is the first section. There were no changes, but I just wanted to check and see if there were any comments.
No.
Okay. County roads and infrastructure.
No comment.
Okay. Climate, resilience, and renewable energy.
Yeah. Oh, Supervisor McGordy.
So one of the things I wanted to include in there that I don't think I see is support for biomass and biofuels, and as part of our as part of our healthy forest management, so that we would take things that are thinned and look for a way to convert them into energy. Because I know that's a thing that's starting to happen, and there's definitely a support in the Department of Conservation for that.
Okay. Disaster prevention, recovery, resiliency, mitigation.
And what I was also talking about yesterday in my supervisor report about the NACO Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee, and the presentation from the Department of Energy and their program for energy conservation programs, and how the block grants were geared towards more populous counties and entities. And so if we could put something in along those lines that for the federal program, advocating for conservation programs at all levels or for rural counties. Supervisor McGordy?
And you're kind of working around this on the edges, but I also would like to see the insurance industry take into account home hardening and other fire prevention issues as part of their rates consideration.
As well as if a community is in a fire-safe community or...
Yeah, so we're spending money on this, and it seems like we should get some credit for that or some consideration, because right now a lot of the way that insurance is done is on an algorithm that the insurance industry uses that's kind of secret. So we'd really encourage some transparency and some credit given for fire prevention protection measures.
That Mr. Pratty has some comment about. Mr. Rutledge.
Can we put you on the spot?
Do you have any update on anything like that, or any verbiage you'd like to see?
Patty, Mendocino County Fire Safety Council, something I was particularly prepared for, but for what it's worth, I mean, there is a lot of movement in that area. In fact, we are just scheduling, State Insurance Commission is going to be coming down and doing a session in Laytonville, a community forum with Q&A coming up next month that we'll be moderating. Absolutely yes. I think you should encourage, the State Insurance Commissioner has a whole platform of things that they've got that are requirements for people to do, and one of which is that there's be a discount for communities that are fire-wise. The disconnect is in getting the insurance companies to actually step up and deliver something in recognition for doing those steps. So those wheels are in motion, but the more push that you can give them to actually pay attention to that and to actually get ahead of the curve. The other thing that we're sort of behind on is the science on this. So we're in the middle of retrofitting homes to what that current list is, and they're still doing new science and changing the requirements as we're going along. I was just in a meeting last week. There's a requirement right now to have 6 inches of non-flammable something around the base of your house, and so there are grants underway to help people do that. And it's my understanding that they're now looking at changing that to 2 feet from 6 inches. Sort of getting an anchor in place so that people who have achieved something can hold it would also be super helpful, so that everything going forward, I guess, is kind of grandfathered in. But that's a little rambly, but yes, I definitely encourage you to push them in that direction. It's a place where there's a lot of chaos for people at the moment, and the quicker we can get to some certainties for people about what they get for what, there will be a lot happier people out there.
Okay.
So when you say non-flammable something, are you talking like gravel, concrete, something like that, or?
So we'll be talking perhaps a little later in the next item, but there are some good models out there for like Ventura County has gotten way ahead of the game in implementing Zone 0 in their area, and that requires 5 feet of non-flammable around the structure, so 5 feet out from the structure and 6 inches up from the ground. So you need to have, you can't have your wood siding that's closer than 6 inches off the ground. And so yeah, so it's both directions.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Rutledge.
Well, I just had one other thing that since we're making suggestions for legislative, Keith Rutledge, Sherwood Firewise, there is a variety of tax credits for home improvements for energy efficiency, also for renewable energy and things like that. I think it'd be a great idea to offer tax credits to homeowners that improve their house fire safety. And again, if they're coming up with standards that need to be met, in addition to the insurance, one side to provide a financial incentive. Scott mentioned financing and such, but I think the state could come up with a state tax credit that homeowners could take advantage of. That's a suggestion.
Good suggestion.
Do you have that?
If I may, through the chair, we do have that in the next bullet point. Advocate for legislation that promotes home hardening in rural areas and provides financial incentives, such as tax credits or grants.
Right, we're on page 11, and that's proposed to be added. Okay, very good.
We have kept COVID-19 response and recovery as we are still getting reimbursed for efforts from the COVID recovery programs.
Okay, going back to the disaster prevention, recovery, resiliency, and mitigation, that we heard from Assemblymember Wood yesterday about exemption for timber harvest plans that were creating forest health and lessening the risk of fire danger.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that we could add along those lines of supporting those kind of measures?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with that?
I agree with that 100%.
Okay. Okay, so we're on to COVID.
One other thing too, before we leave that, is air quality issues associated with control burns, and supporting legislation that would make it engage the air quality management district a little bit more to allow for them.
Yesterday was not a good day in the North County.
Yeah, I know that they're kind of working their way from the north coming south with control burns, so. But it's a lot worse when we have a big forest fire. That's about all I can say.
Okay. Moving on to COVID.
After that, we have natural resources.
So there's a lot of things in here that need to be changed because of the, first of all, the Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency is up and running now completely. So we have that taken care of. We're pretty far along on our plans. We just got a pretty sizable grant from Cal Fish and Wildlife to look at groundwater, surface water interfaces. And everything else about the Potter Valley project too that is concerning water is sort of not right because we're no longer pursuing a license with FERC. So we should probably take some time and just kind of rewrite that because it's more complicated than us just sitting here today. And I'd be willing to do that with you ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you can bring that back time.
And there's also another issue having to do with control, who controls, not who controls, but there's been a move from certain legislators to change permitting of wells, and that's something that I would want us to watch very, very closely because it'd be highly restrictive, and I'd really prefer to keep that here to a local jurisdiction. I don't know how to phrase that, but we could work that out. I'll work with you on that, and we'll try to get that fixed as soon as we can.
Next, we have our new section on agriculture.
And just a question I had with the second state action and the third one, oppose legislative proposals that would regulate the sale and use of pesticides that are not based on science. I'm just wanting a little clarification on that. Do you have anything that you could add to that, the reason why that's in there, or is our ag commissioner online? It's just I'm kind of worried, thinking, you know, we have a ban on GMOs. Could this kind of carry over into what we do?
Mm-hmm.
Are we limiting it in other aspects, even though it says pesticides here? Are we, so our GMO ban, I don't know if it's totally science-based or not.
It's a good question. It's one of those things you would really rather not bring up. But the good news is that there are really very few crops where we would use GMOs in Mendocino County. So it's not like in the Midwest where they're growing lots of row crops and things that are Roundup ready and all that stuff. So I think this is kind of along the lines of materials that people use for pest control that aren't completely really properly licensed. And I think that is what the concern is, and they probably would be more like consumer level than something that a farmer would put on, because farmer pesticide application is pretty highly regulated. So you have to have pesticide use reports, and you'd have to list it, and it'd have to have an EPA number and things like that. So I think that's what this is looking at, is more on the consumer level of somebody using things that aren't really appropriate. But I don't know.
Okay.
We can also follow up with the ag commissioner and get
And ask her
clarification for
specifically
you.
what you mean. What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Of course we support it. So we want anything that's sprayed into the environment to be properly vetted and shown to be effective. as most pesticide registration laws require.
Yeah, and then you get into the Roundup and all those kind of herbicides or pesticides, and how much is science-based. Anyway, we can get clarification on that from the Ag Commissioner. So we'll leave it in for now. Okay.
Next, we have economic and community development.
Yeah, on the page 17.
Yes.
And I see this part about advocate for Coastal Act reform of allowable exemptions to allow repair and maintenance to existing structures located within 50 feet of a coastal bluff, and the installation of solar panels on all properties. And so I guess I'm just installation of solar panels on all properties, and I know that there are some restrictions with the coastal zone. And so is that really what we want to advocate for?
This came from PBS, and key point I think here is the allowable exemptions to make it easier to do repair and maintenance in the coastal zone.
And when we were talking about installation of solar panels, are we talking specifically on a building or freestanding as well?
I would have to get more clarification.
Okay, because I could see it on a building, but freestanding would be different, I think, because that's a separate structure.
Okay, so you'll get clarification on that? Well, I know the issue too was if you had a regular roof compared to a solar panel and the reflection and everything, that it could mar the scenic value.
That's true, so that's something that might be good to get a little clarification on.
I just actually got a note on that. Hold on. The goal was freestanding and structure, but just a roof mount would be.
I'm sorry, you're cutting out a little bit, Kelly.
Sorry, let me get closer. PBS was originally thinking freestanding and a structure, but they would be fine with just a roof mount on a structure, that item.
I think it's been kind of the policy of our board to support alternative energy and microgrids and trying to reduce our carbon footprint. So it fits well in that from that perspective. The environmental impact on the visual environmental impact is something that would probably remain a concern.
Okay. You got that?
Cannabis is up next.
Good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Public safety.
Yeah, and just reading this, the second one, the second red line, oppose any further unfunded state mandates. Seems like we have this several times already in throughout the legislative platform, such as right above it, oppose state or federal funding reductions that shift responsibility Services Administration or support. I think it's in our the guiding principles too. So I don't know if it needs to be there or seems like we're pretty clear on. No further state mandates that aren't funded.
It doesn't hurt to repeat it, so it's really clear where we stand on that. So.
Yeah, then the following one is kind of the same too, so. Anyway, I'm fine with leaving them in. Keep repeating the point. Okay? Human Services?
Yes.
It looked good to me.
Looks good to me as well.
Okay. Ooh. Public health?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Behavioral health?
Except for that one patient.
And then homelessness.
So in behavioral health, I'm pretty sure I read in there that we're looking to see reimbursement for people in mental health crises, whether they're insured or whether they're on Medi-Cal, correct?
I will read through and double check that.
What was your, can you restate that, please?
Being sure that there's public access to mental health care regardless of your insurance.
Yeah, the second bullet point says support insurance parity for mental health services to ensure residents with private insurance have the same services available as those with Medi-Cal.
Correct. That's what I was looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important because when you're in a mental health crisis, it's not when you want to be fighting over what kind of insurance you have. You need to get people to get care right away. And we're not set up so well to really do that here.
But it's in there.
Good.
Okay. Right? Homelessness. And the rewrite, I appreciate the rewrite on the first paragraph. I think it's a little more universal.
Mm-hmm.
Continued funding of Project Home Key too, which is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Known that all along that it was going to be an issue.
Forgive me for not remembering. Do we have anything in there about cleanup of homeless encampments and their effect on public trust resources like our water and?
Yeah, and that was put in there, the state action.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
See the first bullet?
Right, I see it now. Okay.
And then there's a new one here about coordinating with state agencies, protecting natural resources such as parks, waterways, and wildlife habitats from the environmental impacts of homelessness, and then also advocate for state agency funding, mitigate environmental damage caused by encampments such as waste management, habitat restoration, and water quality protection.
Okay, great. Because that is impactful.
Yeah. Okay.
That gets us to the end.
Good with that?
I am.
So So this is the first reading of this for General Government Committee. So what's the process? It's going to come back in November?
Yes, this will come back to the GGC on November 13th. Then hopefully this body will recommend it to the following Board of Supervisors meeting on December 3rd, where hopefully it will be then accepted and passed, and then we send it on to our representatives on the state and federal levels for the end of the year.
Very good. Do you have what you need now?
Yes, I will get those notes from Supervisor McGordy, and then we should be able to board.
All right. Thank you very much. Oh.
Public comment?
Public comment. Right. Let's see. Any public comment?
In the disaster preparedness section, the next issue we're going to talk about has to do with abandoned vacant lots that we're having a difficult time with doing abatement. And there's some language that sort of addresses that, but I know from talking to other state officials and other municipalities and such that this is a problem statewide. It's not just our local problem. So we need a way to efficiently address these abandoned lots where we can't find the owner. You know, the tax collector can't find the owner. There's some that are tax defaulted. There are others that just, we have bad addresses. They've gone to other ownerships over time. Variety of reasons, but we do have a process currently, the administrative abatement, that allows the processing through a public notice procedure, and those that don't respond within the public notice period, you can then have the jurisdiction to then go onto the property and do the work. And you could even file a lien, but in our case, we have funding to do that. And so our barrier has been getting that access. And we've talked about, in our next session, we're going to talk about that, but it may take state legislation, or it might be something the state could do to provide provisions for another process for like an emergency declaration of conditions that would allow less expensive and more efficient process to get that approval to access properties to do this fire.
So you said there is something in here that was already kind of touching on that. What do you see in?
Well, I'd have to get in front of me again, but I think it says, you know, encourage or provide funding for disaster preparedness or things like that. I mean, I think there's some language about vegetation management in general, but not specific about the legal aspects of what if you can't get permission. The thing we've seen is that there's a presumption that, oh, you just go do the lien and do the work, but in our case, people aren't willing to do that because you can't even find the people, and if you put a lien on the property, we can't even sell those properties. We're going to talk about it again in the next session, but that's why this is stagnating, because we have basically abandoned properties that nobody wants to buy, can't sell.
So I'll work with Ms. Hanson and kind of coming up with something that deals with that.
Yeah, I think something about abandoned parcels or some way to non-responsive.
Yeah.
Scott Craddy, Mendocino County Fire Safe Council. So the next level of that I'm pretty sure will definitely need some state intervention is putting together coherent fire breaks for the county. Requires putting together continuous property permission. You can't put a fire break around a community unless you have owners from all the properties on the relevant geography, which is proving to be a huge problem. And eventually we're probably going to need some kind of state level help to be able to design fire projects that protect our communities. So getting that kind of on the burner as something they're thinking about, I think could be helpful. And you know, my other comment is it sounds like there's still time on this, so our staff will kind of do a sweep through. We haven't actually looked at this before, but I think there's some things we can add that would be helpful, particularly for the fire districts. So we will look to send some comments on those.
Okay, if you could, send them to both Hanson and myself. That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. You too, Mr. Rutledge. If you have specific language you wanted to. Okay. Okay, and Ms. Nelson.
Oh, never mind.
Okay.
We're still in public comment.
Good morning. Just a brief comment to update you on the issues relevant to cannabis, as well as some of the other economic development items. With respect to the Origins Council, which I'm an advisor to, as well as MCA, which I'm also an advisor to, we are in the process of doing our annual strategic planning, and will submit, or have MCA, the local regional partner, submit any updates, knowing that the board really wishes to enact a platform in November or December. And I'm sorry that our timing is a little bit misaligned with your wonderful early start, and we really appreciate it. We don't expect major changes, but there may be some refinements and additions that we hope you'll be able to receive from us in November. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any further comments?
Seeing none.
Okay, Supervisor McGordy.
I'd make a motion for the recommended action.
Okay, so the recommended action is to adopt these edits and bring it back in November for further refinement draft. Right. I'll second that. Call the question.
Supervisor Hashek?
Yes.
Supervisor McGordy?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Hanson. So item 2D, discussion and possible action including update to Mendocino County Code, Chapter 8.77, titled Hazardous Vegetation, Combustible Material, Rubbish, and Weeds, Abatement of Hazardous Vegetation and Combustible Material Nuisance Ordinance, and progress towards potential funding sources for implementation. So this has come to the GGC before, it's gone to the board, and we've given direction, and staff has been working on it. And so I wanted to have this time together so that we could talk about what's happening, what are the updates, and also get more community input to make sure that we're all on the same page, because a lot of people who really want to make sure that this works well. So I'll look to staff. Okay, Ms. Hanson.
Good morning again. Lee Hanson, Executive Office. I can give a brief update on the fuel abatement ordinance and enforcement planning process. So the Executive Office submitted a letter requesting an amendment of the two grants, the planning implementation grant on May 9th, 24. We asked the Board of Supervisors and
Kelly, can you bring your microphone a little closer to you? We're breaking up again.
Sorry, I will talk up louder. So on May 9th, 2024, the county submitted a letter to HCD requesting an amendment to the two existing grants. And then on July 9th, the board approved an application for funding and execution of the grant agreement. That was Resolution 24-107. Through a long process of meetings, reviews, forms, and the last round of forms was submitted on August 23rd, 2024. We met again with HCD last week on the 18th for follow-up. I did receive a firm update that it will be another 60 or 90 days for the amendment to be processed. That would put us at around between December 17th and January 16th, 2025 before our grant will be processed, combining the two grants into the new fuel abatement ordinance and enforcement planning project. So this would be a combined project, which would allow us to develop a planning project, which would help us craft new ordinance language concerning the abatement of hazardous vegetation and combustible materials to reduce fire hazards. It would allow us to hire a consultant, which would work with county council and code enforcement and staff to research best practices, prepare plans, and identify future actions through gathering data from like areas and counties. It would evaluate best practices and mechanisms required to enforce effective hazard abatements in rural communities, to refine the county's approach, and create a comprehensive plan that enhances public safety and mitigates fire hazards in Mendocino County. This plan would also assess resources needed to enforce the hazard abatement ordinance effectively and propose procedures for reporting and implementing abatement activities.
Right. One of the things we talked about, I'm sure Keith Rutledge and Scott Craddy would agree, is that besides doing the vegetation abatement for individual private properties, is looking at kind of the acquisition of those properties. We talked about it at the board so that we don't have this problem all the time. And so, is it possible within that scope to add, like, looking at possible avenues of acquisition or transfer of these properties that are deadbeat owners to either, you know, other property owners or other entities that might be willing to take them on? You don't have to give me an answer now.
I won't say it's impossible, but that is not within the scope of work that we have laid out at this time.
That's been submitted already.
The scope of work was really to look at ordinance itself and how to improve it and how to make it a fundable and enforceable ordinance.
Yeah. So I guess maybe I'll look to Deputy CEO Dunicliffe about, you know, if we have that desire, and that was expressed during the board meeting too, to not just have these as one-offs and have to repeat it every 5 years or whatever, then finding some mechanism to transferring these properties, you know, acquiring them through the public auction or just receiving them and then transferring them to I think Mr. Rutledge has worked with some Trout Unlimited or some other entities that might be interested in acquiring these properties. So how would we go about pursuing that?
So I'm not sure. I think that the concept of working with like a Trout Unlimited is an interesting one. At this point, as far as I'm aware, discussions have focused on transferring title to the Brook Trails Township or Community Services District. And I know that those have been problematic just because of the constraints of. So, you know, the concept of transferring or identifying a partner, a third-party partner, and I'll say perhaps like Save the Redwood and Trout Unlimited, is something that I think that would require a little bit of consideration to figure out how to kick that off. I know that some of these property owners have been willing to turn over title to simply walk away from their parcels, but I think that one challenge is going to be that we're talking about tiny parcels, and for any entity to be interested in getting involved, they're going to want to see a significant enough, you know, sort of land mass that it could make a difference for their purposes. I don't think that a 5,000 square foot parcel in Brook Trails on its own would make any impact to trout habitat.
Right. But if there's, you know, well, certainly the Brook Trails Township doesn't have much interest in acquiring more land, I don't think. But it's like, what do we, figuring out if there are other alternatives out there.
One thing that I do think is fascinating is the public comment that was brought up today about potential legislative solutions that would provide a new mechanism, right? Because taking title to the land, and when there's large parcels of land, there's absolutely tools and mechanisms that work right now for ensuring that those are properly managed for the benefit of habitat or other purposes. But these small parcels, we have been kind of hamstrung with the critical issue of private property rights. And if there's state legislation that might come up with a way to issue public notice and get through that for the public benefit, it's really interesting.
Supervisor McGordy.
As I think about this, one thing that comes to mind is that some people's fire hazard might be somebody else's, cherished habitat for birds, screening, and I just wonder how we're going to sort of respect some of those features on the landscape that people might want to protect, because they also could be considered a fire hazard. So and as we start looking at making things sort of flat so that fuel can't ladder up into the canopy, I'm sure there's going to be some people who are not going to be real thrilled about having everything cut to the ground. So that it's something that perhaps our fire safe experts can talk a little bit about, how we protect some of the features that people value for privacy and for just the aesthetics on their property. I want to be sure we don't trample their rights, I guess is what I'm saying. But at the same time, our goal is to keep things safe. Certainly, and I've observed personally as some things have gotten a little bit brushier, it creates habitat that's really beneficial for birds, particularly quail. And as I've seen things transition on my own place from a formerly very heavily grazed sheep pasture into kind of more of a mixed canopy of shrubs and trees, that bird habitat really changes. So, while we want fire safety, I think it's really important for us to think a little bit about also the zoning of or the position where these things are in the landscape and how they affect public safety. I don't want to see everything mowed to the ground everywhere around a building, I guess is what I'm saying. Or I mean, personally, right. I might do that, but I want people to have some choices if there's things that they value and preserve, and how you assess that and how you make those kinds of decisions are something that we want to be a little bit sensitive to as we move forward on this. Maybe I'm getting literally digging into the weeds, but I think that's something that should be considered.
No, it's certainly, ecosystem consideration too. So, Mr. Dunnicliff.
If I could, I just wanted to tie back on, especially here in Supervisor McGordy's comment. And it does seem to me that there's two pieces here, and one of them might be appropriate to handle through the ledge platform advocacy, right, of which is support for logical, coherent fire breaks where they protect communities. And there may be some private property issues that we can advocate be addressed at a state level. And I do think that we're making meaningful progress right now with trying to reallocate the grant funds that we've got and work within the existing confines of private property rights. So it may be a way to kind of consider the fact that we've got two different approaches: one, asking for relief through the state, and two, working at the level that we're at.
Okay.
Public expression. Thank you for coming out today.
Really appreciate it. And I think that at the top, Keith Rutledge, Sherwood Firewise, thank you. I think it is appropriate to address the abatement issues and access to properties to do that abatement work as a fire risk. And Supervisor McGordy, I agree with you that all of that work is CEQA related. So this is all permitting. There's bird surveys that are done. And in the case like the work we're doing with roadside fuel reduction for CAL FIRE up in the Brook Trail subdivision, it's voluntary. So we meet with the owners. We talk about they don't want that particular little bush taken out, or they might have a little tree that we might have taken out, but they use it for a Christmas tree or whatever. I mean, people do have preferences. However, the thing we're dealing with is non-responsive property. People that we can't find, people that aren't responding, people that aren't paying their taxes. Right now, there's tax defaulted parcels, and the county can take those tax defaulted parcels and put them up for sale. Okay, so here's yet another mechanism. It's not an abatement and it's not a taking the ownership. You're saying we're going to take your property and sell it to somebody. And there's actually in the state legislation a preference for public entities to be the first one to take property. In fact, I believe the process states the county comes up with the list in July, and then they schedule an auction sometime in the future. And between that time, if a public entity could request those, who are all those parcels that aren't paying their dues? Long story short, there may be, back to the proposal that we have to shift the funds for the RFP, there may be a way to look at these others as options, of ownership being one of them, some kind of an administrative abatement that doesn't have as expensive as another. And also the public ownership, I think, is a big one. I want to address the comment about not interested in small parcels. The North Coast Resource Partnership, we've spoken with them about this. They like landscape scale. And again, just thinking about options, I'm not saying anybody's talking about this, but for example, the Brook Trails Township Community Services District has a 2,500 acre greenbelt and a number of small parcels that they might be willing to put over to a public ownership, like a land trust or something like that, or tribal entity that would have the ability to maintain that over time. And it's been talked about that it would be sort of a hopscotch thing with these vacant lots, but it's really interesting if you look at the map, and if you just plot the 1,500 homes amongst those 6,000 vacant, or 6,000 parcels and this 2,500 acre greenbelt, it looks like a little bunch of homes that are islands in an ocean of forest, because they're literally surrounded by all this forest. So Supervisor McGordy, I totally agree with your concept that we want to do things in environmentally fashion. That's in the regs, that's what we do. However, with insurance companies, they're closing down people's insurance and they don't have the ability to cut dangerous fuels on either side or around their house for defensible space. That's going to be an issue for us, and in particular the FEMA grant that's coming up. If we're not able to get that defensible space cleared, we're going to be hamstrung, just like we are right now at Sherwood Firewires, like Fire Safe Council is, for the funds we already have to do that kind of work. But if we can't get access to the owner, one way or the other, get their permission, we can't do the work. Hope that wasn't too rambling.
Yeah, I asked a question. So, it's a real dilemma on what you do, because I mean, sometimes these things aren't compatible. So if we're trying to create a very safe space that prevents laddering of fuels, shrubs may have to go, and this is kind of the discussion that we have to have. And I think you're creating fire breaks and around communities is a really critical issue in California. Particularly, I hear it a lot, especially in counties that are surrounded by national forests that haven't been tended for a long time, and they feel totally vulnerable, and they can't get a response from the feds to do something about the danger they live in, because whole towns disappear when the place goes up. So.
Understood. Anything in here?
Hello, Scott Grady, Sonoma County Fire Safe Council again. One, I just want to thank you for putting this effort together. It is a super complex issue to tackle. And so I want to advocate that as you get this going and you get the grant funding, that you sort of start with an attempt to get the right people in the room to talk and have some time, and not just sprint down a particular path. Getting people from the environmental side in the room is certainly a great idea. There are a lot of places doing this, so I think people are plowing this for us. I mentioned Ventura, and Nevada County has already sort of pioneered some of this. They have ordinances in place that make vacant property owners responsible for the defensible space of people near them. So putting in something, starting off with an ordinance that makes an obligation to have that area cleared, whether you have a building on it or not, to help your neighbors, is a place to go. So you have a place to start from enforcing this stuff. There are also programs out there that send notices to everybody in an area and sort of police through time. What I would like to see, so we don't you know, I'm going to say I'm not such a big fan of trying to acquire properties, but I do think something in place that puts in a sort of a standing abatement requirement for places that are hazardous, so that once you've found a place is hazardous, you abate it, you put in an ordinance to, or you put in an order to abate it, so we have the ability to go in and do something that's standing, that has built into it, and every 3 years there's a follow-up, so that, you know, you find those places, you do it once. I think there's a lot of room for partnership here. One of the things I think I mentioned that Ventura does is they blanket the area with notices, so everybody gets a notice. Fire Safe Council could perhaps take that on for the county, for areas that we can look for ways we can make this work together as a team. Just to address Supervisor McGordy's comment, it is very much a misnomer that fire safety is about clearing things to the ground. The science says that clearing things immediately 5 feet around your home is super important. After that, the landscape was maintained for millennia before the last couple hundred years in a way that people lived with fire and also had habitat. So it's not incompatible. It just requires a bit of thoughtfulness, which I think we're fully capable of if we take the time. Yeah.
Obviously, Brook Trails is in my district. Mr. Rutledge has done a great job with the fire safe community there. And but are you seeing these issues in other parts of the county where you have these deadbeat owners or non-responsive people who and are creating, fire hazards?
Yeah, certainly one of the most common calls we get is a complaint about my neighbor's whatever, and often those are very legit. It is countywide. It's one of the reasons we have the ordinance that was there. That was one of the first things that I did on this job was field a call from Carrie Brown, who said, we need an abatement ordinance because it's one of the things I get the most complaints about. So it's an issue that's countywide that, it again is going to take some work getting to. It's super tricky because property rights are a federal issue, and there's a lot of hard lines about what you can do there. But I think if we can get to some common sense things, currently one of the blockades is that it's expensive because you have to have somebody go and look at each property and declare it a nuisance and document it and then, file something. I think if we can get to a place where we have maybe some standards in the ordinance that says property that hasn't been managed if somebody hasn't done vegetation management in 3 years, it is a hazard. And therefore, so we don't have to have like such a protracted and expert involved process to be able to get to the place where we can take action. And in Brook Trails, that is a huge issue. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Hi, Swedna Lala, Executive Office. I just want to add one more point to the conversation. I appreciate Kelly Henson's detailed report on the grant program. So I want to add a little bit more that the grant program does cover a complete analysis of what works for other counties. So abatement it will come up in one of the analysis. So the plan won't take you directly to how to abate, but it will look at whether abatement is feasible for the county.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it was mentioned about Nevada County, and so we're going to be looking at those kind of situations, those ordinances too. That would be part of this grant. All right. Any further comments from the public?
Rutledge, Sherwood Firewise. One other thing about the public ownership that's interesting, Trout Unlimited is interested in the watershed, the North Coast Resource Partnership. There's a public, lots of land trusts also have interests in this, and the tribal councils as well for the getting some land back kind of thing. So there's a number of public entities that would be interested in taking ownership of this. And the fact that it's broken up is not really a big concern because it's watershed management. And again, when you look at in the case of Brook Trails I'm talking about, when you look at the whole picture, if you just look at the 1,500 homes in there, like I say, they're just little dots on the map compared to the huge area of watershed management that we're talking about addressing. And I'm sure that, I know that Brook Trails District does not have funding to do forest management in their acreage, and they have a fire chief that's a house fire fighter, and he's not a forester, you know, and so we hear that a lot. Having an entity that had the interest of maintaining that property in a safe and ecological fashion, I think it would be to everybody's benefit, to the owners and the public. And so I think that's something I really encourage, is that we look at that public ownership option as something that could be done. And even people that wanted to give their parcels, we've had the same thing, could donate to that public entity and get a tax deduction for donating their property. So people who wanted to voluntarily get out of their properties could do that. And if they didn't want to, as long as people are maintaining their property, that's fine if people want to continue owning it. But we're finding they can't sell the property over time. The kids have inherited it. They're trying to get rid of it. They're paying the taxes on it. But there's really no forward future for them other than just being a good landowner for that little parcel. So we really need to look at that ownership. And again, I want to encourage that there are public entities that would be interested in taking up that ownership. Thanks.
Yeah, is that a conversation that we should have with Brook Trails?
Well, again, I won't put any, say anything other than I have spoken with representatives. I've spoken with the fire chief and the general manager, Cam Ellis, and Chief Neuer. I think if you'd have to, again, we have to talk in big picture legal kinds of terms. I think if Brook Trails could maintain the benefits that they currently have of trails and the beauty of the park, golf courses there, so on and so forth, and just give up the liabilities of having to maintain that because some other entity actually owns that. This is publicly owned right now, most of it. I think there would be a lot of interest in doing that. Certainly their counsel, Chris Neary, whatever, could work with somebody that would acquire that property to work out any kind of easements for the water system or whatever would need to be done to make it so it was really a viable option for the district. But I think that district, I'm speaking on my own behalf, not for them, but I think they would be relieved of not having to go out and get grants every year and feel like they're not keep up with that work, because that's the problem. Really a, public land management kind of entity.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other public expression?
Seeing none online.
Supervisor McGordy.
I move the recommended action.
Okay. And the recommended action is accept the update. Yeah. I'll second that.
Supervisor Hashek?
Yes.
Supervisor McGordy?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Very good. Thank you for everyone for your work on this, because it's important work. Very important. So, okay, moving on to item 3A, approval of minutes of September 25th, 2024 regular meeting.
I move approval of the minutes from September 25th, 2024 regular meeting.
Second, any public comment? Seeing none?
None online.
Call the question.
Supervisor McGordy?
Yes.
Supervisor Hashek?
Yes.
The motion carries unanimously.
All right, moving on to public expression. Any comments on items of interest? No one in the chamber? Anyone online?
Seeing none online.
Okay. We'll move to item 3C, announcements.
None for me.
Okay, and just I think at the next GGC meeting on November 13th, we've got, let's see, we've got the legislative platform coming back. We'll have a cannabis report. We're going to have an item on the Microenterprise for cannabis businesses. And I think Supervisor McGordy is going to have an item about an update on illegal cannabis grows and what you've learned at the NCRP. Okay. I think that's it. Okay, so at 11:27, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.